I lost my husband twice. My story of Alzheimer's. Hello everyone, welcome to Signpost for Living with Dr. Kirsten Hunter. Do you like the French jazz music there, Margie?
Oh, yes.
Yes. I love how everyone does a little dance at the beginning.
Yeah, right.
Everyone, we have gorgeous Margie here, and thank you so much for coming. What was your thought when I invited you?
Oh, a bit of scariness.
Scariness?
Yeah, right.
What?
Right.
Podcast?
Never done something, yes.
Yeah. And we're talking about your husband who had Alzheimer's. And when we talk about losing your husband twice, we're talking about the deterioration of him through that process of him having Alzheimer's and then ultimately his death. So it's a pretty brave topic. Mm-hmm. Do you feel a bit daunted?
No, it is what it is.
Well, that's really good.
Yeah.
And how long ago did he pass away?
About 6 months ago.
Not long. That's pretty fresh. Well, thank you so much. And as we were just saying, just before we pressed record, I have my heartfelt dedication to the concept of people who are on this pathway with Alzheimer's, and they really can feel incredibly overwhelmed and alone and trying to understand what the hell's going on and what's coming their way. And I really hope this is a resource they can reach for.
Mm-hmm. That's understandable. They need the resources.
Yeah. How did you go early on with were you pretty switched on with reaching out to resource? I mean, we're going to go all over the place, so just humour me.
I certainly was. I early on I knew something was happening, this is not the person who it was. Just driving around in our city and getting to an intersection, and I'm going, oh, wow, he didn't know which way to go. So I'm starting to look and see what's happening. I tried to find some print material at that point. This is 2018 or 17. And and then that led me to Alzheimer's Queensland. And then it also led me to lots of workshops and things like that and talking to people. So a lot of one-on-one talking with people and getting some help and caring help.
Yeah, and you're a very switched-on, educated person, and you reached out to kind of educate yourself as much as you could.
Exactly.
But how did you know what you were educating yourself about? I mean...
my father had Alzheimer's.
Did he?
Yes, so he had, and he, you can tell by the accent, he was in the U.S., and I got back and forth numerous times to see him and help my mother with things, so...
So when your husband started to deteriorate, how quickly did you twig that this was Alzheimer's?
Well, I just thought something was strange, and I didn't know what type, because actually there are 150 types of dementia.
Really?
And an individual can have, and that's only because I've done all these work classes and things.
This is not my specialist area,
right.
So bring it on, bring it on.
And also an individual can have more than one type of dementia.
How can there be so many?
There are a lot of things that trigger it, and that's why it's so difficult for a specialist to diagnose an individual. Alzheimer's is clearly the main one that people hear about and know more about, but some of the people that I know with some sort of dementia, it's not reading the same way for what the textbooks say. So
okay, so we're going to go back in time in a minute, but when I talk with clients about this, I really say, look, this is really not my area of specialty. I can talk a lot. I can work very much with families with regard to what is coming, the symptomatology, and how to cope with that as a family, but I'm not very good on the neurological side. It's not my area. Mm-hmm. So people say to me, what's the difference between dementia and Alzheimer's? And I say, well, let's go check that out because I'm a bit rusty.
Well, dementia is the whole umbrella.
So it's an umbrella term, and within it there's different types of dementia.
Yes. Alzheimer's is the most common. Largest number of people have that for whatever reason, and I don't know why. So there's a frontal lobe There's also Lewy body, which is more like a Parkinson's type disease.
Yeah.
So there, and then there's all sorts of variations. So it's truly amazing. So
complex.
So one aspect of my husband, he was always very cold, and that's sort of a deterioration of the brain and behind either the left or the right ear, and that controls the temperature.
Right.
So, so another individual with Alzheimer's may not have that. So that, as I say, it's very difficult to be diagnosed because of all these variations.
My understanding is people have MRIs and they have a look at the brain activity.
Yes, well, that's just, the MRI just looks at the size of the brain. And then there's the PET scan, which is a radiation type scan. So the individual who's being tested either has an injection or swallows a pill, and they wait a certain amount of time. And what is happening in the brain is the colors, the activity of the brain is picked up and made into different colors by this radiation. And I'm not a doctor, so I really, anyway.
Simple speak is actually most
speak,
helpful.
Right.
Most helpful.
So, in other words, a little child, 3, 4. If you were to do a PET scan on that individual, you'd see red and orange and really bright colors because they're, running and playing and playing with whatever.
Really dynamic.
Yeah. And whereas my husband, and I just saw the films recently, they were very little yellow. So when the doctor says he's doing the best he can, that is the truth. He is doing the best he can. And though it might be frustrating to everybody involved, he is doing the best he can.
And what was the time frame for you seeing these? What were more of the indicators that had you alert? I think that my husband is going down the path of my father, which would have been a very confronting concept because you really understood what that pathway was.
Yes, but I wasn't physically with them that much.
Your
it was
father.
more with the caring when he was in a
because we're in Australia,
home. Yes,
he's in
we're
America.
Right, exactly. So I was getting letters from my mother and things like that, and issues that was happening for her. But as far as my husband, what I was seeing, things that, and you look back and loss of confidence in being able to do something, going to...
Like what sort of things?
Venturing out, going to his normal activities, and he was going to a men's group for coffee on a Tuesday morning, and he frequently could not find the location of it, whereas a year ago he would have.
So disorientated.
They're very disoriented. And I would try it. I'd write maps and things like that. And there was one time, it was quite a ways away, probably 5 kilometers away was the coffee morning. And it was a friend's house that he really enjoyed. And so I said, well, how about you follow me in your car? And he did, but he was going slower and slower, and eventually I just basically had to stop. So he couldn't process the fact that he needed to keep up with me going 60 k's per hour on a residential road, and I'd have to stop every once in a while for him to catch up. And I don't know really how he got home, because he followed me to John's place.
Oh,
and
that's
then,
so scary.
But there were other times when I could see that.
What about around the house? Things around the house?
Yes, things around the house.
Daily function, what did you see? I'd love you to talk about that, because these are the things that people start to kind of alert to, and it draws their attention to seek medical attention if they have more awareness.
Sometimes it's repetitive things. I know we have a liquid amber tree in our front yard.
Beautiful.
And in the autumn, it was the leaves drop, of course. And at one point, and he's just picking up, say, 12 leaves and then walking them to the backyard where the green lidded bin is located, and then back.
So really
back and forth.
losing his capacity for a systematic approach.
Yes, right. He didn't get the rake. He didn't get something to put all the leaves on.
So he
to be able
couldn't
to carry
problem
them.
solve.
No.
Yeah.
And eventually, getting himself dressed, shoes.
Particularly buttons,
Definitely buttons.
Yeah, and just to give a context for the audience as well, my husband, what was that? My father, he had dementia, so I've been through it firsthand with my history, and he passed away when I was 30. He had Parkinson's and dementia. So, a lot of what you're saying I can relate to. Yeah, and I remember for him it was very much, he had to, ended up wearing long pants that had elastic waist. He couldn't handle a fly, and my father used to like to wear button-up shirts, and we had to wear polo shirts, which he didn't like.
That's right, exactly.
And he really struggled with those sorts of just fine motor skills.
Yes, and also
mind you, he had Parkinson's, so I don't know what was dementia and Parkinson's. Quite confusing.
It is. It is. But some of the Parkinson's go to dementia.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
I'm aware of that as far as a mutual friend. A friend, I mean, not a mutual friend, but a friend.
Yeah, yeah.
So dressing was a problem, and shoes on the correct foot was a problem. And I, tell him, this is the left one, this is the right one. But eventually I worked it out. As soon as you put your right leg over your left foot, knee, it becomes the left foot. And this is
So what would you say? Just cross your legs and you'll have it right.
Well, I guess I should have learned a little earlier and put the shoes on so that there were shoes on the floor so he would do it that way.
Him.
But you just work that out and it becomes, that is the left one. All right, no matter what I've said. But no, so dressing became a problem.
How about showering? How about...
I don't really know. I don't let him do that himself.
Let him be?
Let him be. And it was compounded by the fact that I had a knee replacement and sleeping in the same bed. He moved out to another room, to the guest room, and so I wasn't aware of how many times he got up in the middle of the night or whatever. But that was also sort of very critical too, because I was never aware that he could be out wandering.
Did that happen?
Not that I really know. I'm not sure of it.
What makes you wonder that he did?
Because at one point in the summertime, he sort of said, sometimes I go outside, and I'm going, I better tell the neighbors.
Yeah.
And so I just sort of alerted them and whatever. So I wasn't aware. And right up until, I was just about ready to buy special mats that would indicate that he had gotten up and walked out of the bedroom to go to the toilet, to go out the front door or whatever, and also change the door locks. I was just about when offer came for residential care for him.
Okay.
So I was afraid he was going to be wandering and whatever.
And really be in an incredibly vulnerable position because he wouldn't know his way home.
That's right.
What about driving? How did you go with him with driving and the point at which he couldn't drive and how to negotiate that?
That was difficult. Also, the driving situation, I did a lot of phoning around to try and find out, what do you do? He was very belligerent a lot through this. Not aggressive at all, but angry. So you shouldn't be driving would be, maybe I might have said, I really wish you wouldn't drive.
Did he have insight, though, as to why he shouldn't drive? Did he have insight through this period of time that he was deteriorating?
No.
He didn't realise?
If he had insight, he did not acknowledge it.
So it wasn't on the table, it was unspoken.
That's right. And looking through things now, because he, as a teacher, he used slides a lot with students or other things that I'll find in his cupboard. He wrote copious notes on the boxes of things. I have one...
What do you mean? Is this what his cue for himself when he was...
Yes,
okay.
Cues for himself.
Memory cues,
Yes, exactly.
Okay. Sorry, what
so
did
he
you
was
say?
writing. I have a That'll be the next treat.
Okay.
I have a box, and it says, probably says slides in it.
Yeah.
But he says, if you open this box, you better be able to put it back together again.
What does that mean? I don't know what that means.
Well, it means that he probably took a long time to put this box together with the things in it. And he's taped it up in such a way that I or another individual would have a difficult time taking it apart and also putting it back together again. And it was on the onus of the person who
warning. A lot of work's gone into this. Don't muck it up.
That's right.
Wow. That's kind of strange foresight, really.
So I think he did. He probably was aware that things were going wrong. One of the things, excuse me, I mentioned that he was a teacher, etc., and I used to think that he was totally marking papers, but as when I'm looking through his belongings and his bookcases and things, he was also journaling a lot. He was writing diaries.
Really?
And they sort of stopped. They did not stop. Usually it was international news that tweaked him to write something. Or these are things that maybe on a trip, but also there would be regular things, maybe not every day, but he was, call it a diary, call it a journal, whatever you want to call it. But he certainly wasn't doing any of that from...
So there was
probably,
a point
it stopped. It wasn't like he was saying, I think things are going amiss.
And when you look at the date where there was the last entry, is it relevant? Does it sit with what was happening in the real world?
Really, I'm trying to think no, I don't. In 2016, we were in Europe and things like that, and so he was certainly backing away from being the leader of the two of us when we were doing independent travel at one point. And
So historically he'd been more of a leader?
Yeah.
So you saw a shift?
Yeah, there was a shift.
2016, that's a while ago.
Yeah.
When do you think the onset was of the dementia that you could...
Yeah, well, you don't know. That sort of thing, you let me do majority of the driving.
Which was out of character.
Well, it would have been more half and half. It would have been half and half.
Okay.
I can understand city driving. He never liked it, blah, blah, blah. But as far as driving in the countryside, and we were in the country areas in Wales.
It's a very interesting question, though, isn't it? When he started to kind of retreat more.
You have no idea.
The actual onset.
No.
When was it that you started to tweak and see the difference in him with regard to his, as you say, he became disorientated?
I'd say 2016.
Right, yeah, around then.
So it was. And in 2017, we went back to the U.S. for a trip.
Okay, so can we just explain to the listeners? So you're from the U.S.
Yes.
And we're in Australia now, everybody. And you came here how many years ago?
48 years ago.
48 years ago. So are you Australian?
Yes.
Ah, you are.
Yeah.
Do you feel Australian?
Definitely.
Oh, I love that. Well, that's so nice. But
you're also very American.
You're also American. You're American Australian. That's good. That's very good. Okay, sorry. Keep going.
Yes. So the goal of 2017 was to have him have one last trip, because I could see this is not going to happen again. He's not going to go travel to see his mother or something of that nature.
So it's like, hey, you felt like an impetus. Oh, you travel anyway, but
right.
You really felt an impetus to connect him with family for this last time. That's
exactly.
very, very powerful.
Right. And my goal was to everybody that we stayed with, and it was numerous. So we started off with his cousins and then his sister and then good friends and on and on and on. I wouldn't say anything about what I was seeing with Jean. And I would just sort of do a little summary at the end. I said, well, how did you find your cousin or your brother?
Was this a spot quiz? Like,
not really a spot quiz, but I just wanted to have their their undivided or unprompted
their response, how aware they were, or for them to work it out for themselves.
Absolutely.
That's interesting.
Well, I wanted it to be validated, I guess.
You wanted their support.
Yes, oh, definitely, and I had
Right.
their support.
Yeah, but them seeing it with their own eyes, and them coming to you and say, "Hey, what's going on?" That would have been very meaningful for you. Whereas if I get it, and as I think, because if you had have come to them and said, "Hey, this is where he's at,"
the very last family that we stayed with were good friends that he'd grown up with and things like that, and she was a nurse, and I thought, oh look, I was tired.
Yeah. It would have been challenging to travel with him as well.
Definitely challenging.
Tell me a bit about that, because you guys are seasoned travellers, well and truly. Travelled all around the world, I imagine. And he were travelling with someone with Alzheimer's. What was that like? What could he or couldn't do?
Very scary, a lot of ways, because you get into even a small airport. So here's an individual who can't dress himself, basically.
Yeah.
So and a button shirt. The buttons are askew-with and
mismatched.
Mismatched. And I, at one point, I remember in this small airport, and I said, your shirt isn't buttoned right. Oh, it is. And so he went off to the men's room and came back. He says, yes, it is.
Is this irritation you mentioned, the anger?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So would that happen when you would confront him with issues?
Yeah, every time.
Oh, every time?
Just about every time. There wasn't,
That's
I couldn't help him to
challenging.
change it. And also, it was also, the other aspect that was dangerous for me, or felt dangerous, was for me to use the ladies' room in an airport.
Right.
Without him. What do I do? So I would go into a place like a handicapped one.
Yeah.
So at least it was just, in and out type thing, and not numerous or whatever, and just wait here by the luggage, that sort of thing. Whereas...
Did he ever wander off?
No.
Thank
I was
goodness.
lucky. Yeah.
But I understand your concern.
Right, yeah.
And also travelling is exhausting. It's disorientating when you've got no problems. And it would have been a tough gig. Also, when someone has got Alzheimer's dementia, they really need a fairly contained home environment and routine, because their brain is not functioning very well.
That's right.
So they only have a small capacity, so that gets used up pretty quick. So for you to go from house to house to house, that would have been really overwhelming for him. Did he become agitated or fatigued? Stressed?
Well, I probably was, and so was I.
Yeah. There you go.
There you go. I mean, the start of the trip was a bit harrowing, because we flew from our area to Sydney and had to spend the night at a hotel. I chose one that I thought was reasonably close. And the next morning I thought, shall we have breakfast here, where we've already had dinner? It's a place he knows, it'll be easier. Or should we go to the airport, where it's really, really, really busy in Sydney Airport, to go find breakfast?
Loud, hectic, yeah.
So that's what we chose to do. The taxi was running late because of traffic, of course. Get to the airport and we plug everything into the kiosk to say where your destination was, and on and on and on. And then we go up to the desk to check in, and it was the first person. It was the person we saw was setting up her station there. And taking a little bit longer than maybe we should. We had a little bit of another delay, and then her supervisor came and said, that flight is closed.
Oh, really?
So,
yeah. Stress.
Yeah, exactly. Husband felt as though both arms and legs were removed, and I thought, thank goodness we have our luggage. It's not on the plane,
Yeah, you poor thing.
So we talked with the airline, got us on the next flight the next day, and we went to the nearest airport hotel and spent the night.
On repeat, you poor thing. Last thing you needed.
Absolutely.
So stressful. You know, to talk about deterioration in someone, we need to have a reference point of where they were pre that kind of, deterioration. So let's talk about your husband. What was he like? What was his character? What were his strengths? Tell me, just
outdoors things.
He was a teacher.
He was a teacher, high school geography teacher, and
clearly interested in world events.
Definitely world issues. He was an encyclopedia as far as world issues, and for me, I could talk to him about what's happening even today in Israel and Pakistan. Sorry, not Pakistan, but Palestine. Palestine. Or what's happening in the Ukraine, etc. So I would talk to him about those things, and he would explain it to me in such a way so that when my psychologist said that I would grieve in different ways, that is certainly one area I have grieved, because he was my source of knowledge, and our conversations would be enlightening me as to what was happening in this area and why it was historically happening, etc. So that was really very special for me.
And you're I know you very well, and you're a great brain. You're a thinker. You're analytical. You love to have a good kind of chew through world events as they're happening. So I could really imagine the two of you sitting over a coffee table and talking about the latest world events. And you've been very stimulated by him. You've been able to well and truly keep up with him, and that being a real compatibility between you.
And it was. And I mean, that was right from the word go. He was a font of information. So that was one aspect of him. And his students liked him. He was fair. He was a very fair person. Didn't matter. The children, the students, the high school students realized they'd get a fair go with him. And so one particular little trip they had, it was towards the end of a term, and there were sort of a mixed group of kids that students who were going to go out to a nearby creek area, from a dam area that's in our region. And he had been with another teacher, and they had sussed this out, but it had been 6 months before. This would be great for a field trip and look at the vegetation, look at the geomorphology, and on and on and on.
So are we talking like an overnight kind of situation?
No, just a day trip.
Day trip, yeah.
Day trip. So the group that he had were not his own class. It was a mixed group of other students that hadn't been doing the classes were all broken up, so he didn't really know all the students, and that put him at a handicap. He also had he didn't have his other geography mate as the other teacher. He had a student teacher.
Right, so he's with a lot of unknowns, yeah.
Yeah, a lot of unknowns in this particular thing.
In a terrain that he'd been at 6 months earlier.
Right, and rain had occurred. The lantana was heavy and high.
So lantana in Australia is this weed that takes over. It's beautiful.
Spiky.
It's quite beautiful, kind of strangely with
right.
flowers. No, not really. And but yeah, it really is. It is really this carpet of plantation, isn't it? Enormous,
especially along a creek bed.
Yeah.
So the students basically were not, the thing that got alerted to the school, etc., and the community was the students were not picked up at the correct time and the correct location.
So the parents come to pick up the kids and they're not there.
Correct.
Alarm bells.
Alarm bells.
Bing, bing, bing.
Bing, bing, bing.
Oh, not good. Not good.
So, no, not good at all. So, and what had happened on the ground was my husband sent two of the boys off to see what the track was going to be like and which way they should go. Keep going this way, or should we just wait here for a while? Because they knew they were not at their destination for the buses to pick them up.
Right, so the terrain had changed so much from Lantana.
Exactly.
They got lost.
Right. So the boys went off, and he never saw them again. They were supposed to come back.
Oh my gosh.
So he had to...
Teacher's hell.
Yeah, right. And then also a student fell in the creek, and she was quite cold, wet. She just sat there. She just sort of, ha 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 ha, this is fun, whatever. But, she's now cold and wet, and she's asthmatic.
Oh my gosh.
So, yeah. So what the staff did, husband, always travels with a first aid kit and on and on and a full first aid kit, and to be able to help this girl who was now stressed and wet, they got up to a level where they could build a fire. They built 3 fires so that she was in the center. So to keep her warm, he sent 2 other students out along a road track, until they found a car or house to be able to raise the alarm.
Yeah.
So somebody was driving along on that track eventually, and picked these young people up, raised the alarm, etc. And this got a doctor to come out to the girl, and I guess and eventually the buses were directed to the nearest area to be able to get to them.
What about the original 2 youths that got lost? Somehow they were found.
Yeah, they got up to a farm, and like at Ravensbourne. Yeah,
they went to a farm.
Yeah,
there's a distance from those 2 areas.
Right. And maybe called their parents. I can't remember that aspect. The thing is, all right, so the newspaper picked up this story. Students lost on field trip.
Great story.
And the next day, of course, there's all this debriefing, but with the staff and the principal, etc. But the next day, when he was in class again, or it might have been on Friday, I cannot remember. And on the next class day, he used the printout from the newspaper to explain how much of this story is accurate, how much of it is inaccurate.
Hey kids, this is a learning opportunity.
That's exactly
Good on him.
That's what he did.
Good on him. I dare say the proportion was not great.
Yes,
wow. But what did the school think of him? He was in this circumstance. What was the level of confidence in him?
Absolute 100% confidence.
And that's the punchline, isn't it?
That is the punchline.
This is the truth of his character.
That's it, right. There were people, the other backstory is I had gone out of our city. I'd left my daughter to be picked up by her friend's parents.
So your 2 kids at primary school at this stage?
Yes, exactly. Yeah. Primary school. The son was picked up by other friends, and I expected to, when I came home from a 3-hour trip, that the children would be home and my husband would be at home. And there was a little note from the daughter saying, where are you, Mummy?
No, Dad, where are you, Mummy?
Yeah, right.
And you're like, oh my gosh, something has gone awry.
I set about collecting the children and getting up to the school. And when I got to the school, and the children and I got to the school, the staff were right behind my husband, 100%.
Really supportive.
Right, very supportive. The principal was reasonably new, but so he was depending on 2 other really good friends who had worked with my husband on many camps and trips and things like that, and knew the kind of so it's a great level that he was.
Yeah, and so this is a really great story that epitomizes him. He was someone who was very intelligent, very informed, very inquisitive, critical mind, who was very responsible and resourceful. Mm-hmm. And then the thing that he lost was his cognitive capacity.
Totally.
It's cruel, isn't it?
Absolutely, it is cruel. It's not fair, Nobody expects that.
How did you go with processing this happening? The point, you say it's not fair, it's a great point.
No.
With processing, okay, my husband has dementia, this is the pathway we're looking at. How did you go with the grief of that, the acceptance, the acknowledgement of that?
Some of it I can't remember.
That's fine.
I can't remember. I'm blessed with the fact that I have a lot of friends, and I quickly learned I would, vent a little bit for about maybe 4 or 5 minutes in whatever we were doing or
this really
having
sucks.
coffee.
I hate this. This is really
right.
hard.
Yeah,
I'm frustrated.
And this is, what's he doing now? And, whatever. And this is what I've organized. And then I realized that that's not there. That's not why we're friends. And also, yes, they were supporting me, but, we got on with whatever were our interests and things like that. I also, said about learning a lot about dementia, and did a lot of classes and workshops and whatever was available for me here in town. So, and at that point, there were much more than what there would be with the internet happening now. So
more before the internet.
No, it was not the internet. It was just that COVID and all that sort of stuff.
Sure.
I mean,
COVID
it's quite
really
different.
has dried up a lot of community resources
yes, but
that are face-to-face.
It was even over before then.
Right.
It's hard to find a one-on-one or a group and with people helping you. However, last year, and Blue Care is still doing it, I believe, is doing something called Grief, Loss, and Dementia, and a 3-week.
And Blue Care is a Queensland-based kind of community support group that does a whole spectrum of things. Yeah,
right, exactly. So that's something I did last year, even so, as recent as that. So I'm still looking for answers, and that's when I learned certainly that an individual can have different types of dementia at the same time.
Yeah. How did you go with working out that he needed to have supported care rather than stay at home? That's a very big
it is an issue.
Point of kind of acknowledgement and also a big kind of decision.
I couldn't trust him when I went out for longer periods of time. And even if I were out, and eventually, so I was looking for a place that he could go for daytime care. Yeah. That's basically what I was looking for. Respite care.
Yeah.
So where he'd do activities, or at one point they were doing a lot of little mini trips, and he was enjoying that, and that was really good.
Gives you a break. He gets stimulation.
That's right.
Supportive environment.
So
win-win.
Without me, being the sole supporter and entertainer.
He would have been reluctant, though, because it was a change.
He definitely was reluctant.
Yeah.
So, fortunately, they would pick people up. So
you're like, on your bike, you're going.
That's right. So,
I know it's good for you. Go.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But during this period of time, I never knew when he was coming home. So it was like sort of what I call the school hours. So sometimes, it was like 2:00, and I might have been staying out until 3, and that was sort of fine. But I'd sort of, my friends got used to me saying, "Oh, got to get home," or I'm on, short leash. I used to call it.
He's getting a break.
Yes. And I was curtailing my activities because of it, and whatever.
So then you moved from there into
longer care. So I did manage several overseas trips in this period.
You.
Yes. I was away for a month one time. That was in 2018.
I mean, the reality is that this is a balance, isn't it? You're his primary carer. It's an incredibly one-way process. You're giving and you're supporting. And it is important to take time out for yourself, because this is going over years and years and years of your life. And to take time out for yourself so that you can go and refuel, and you're important. and come back and ultimately be a better version for him. Mm-hmm. So I think that that's really healthy to get that balance and not to have a martyrdom framework.
Definitely not.
No risk of that?
No risk of that.
Go you. That's really important.
No, because, I personally feel that, yes, we're married, but I'm an individual also. You do your things, and I'd always encouraged him to do his things.
Yeah.
So I felt that I deserved to do my things.
There's no question, but still the bottom line was that you were the person supporting him for many, many years. You know, and I mean, we mentioned this before we started, that you had a sense of what the time frame would be. How long did you think this would go for? Because he was diagnosed 2016. Who knows the onset?
No, actually, it was 2017.
Okay.
November, yeah.
And then he passed away 2022. So we've got 5 years in there. How long did you think the path would be?
Well, at one point, with when he was in care, in the full-time care, I sort of thought, I just think this is going to go on. Because sometimes, I mean, they say Alzheimer's, they say lasts for 10 years. Some of the other types of dementia is shorter. And I'm going, okay, where do we look? Where's day one? Where's day 10 years on.
How do I survive 10 years?
Yes. Right.
You definitely go travelling for a month at a time here and there.
I would, yeah.
Well, that's really sensible.
Yeah, that's right.
So you didn't know, and it was a much shorter time frame, wasn't it?
It was. And for whatever reason, that was.
What was he like when he went into care? What was his response?
Initially, he hated it, absolutely hated it.
Was that really hard for you?
Oh, definitely, absolutely.
You must have felt quite torn.
It was.
I mean, he was safe. He was physically safe.
Yes, I lied. I told him he was going to respite. He was used to being in a respite. Mm-hmm. So those times that I had gone for a month, he was used to that, or even sometimes I would go away for a weekend or something like that, just to get him used to full-time care. Mm-hmm. And certainly the support that he was getting from this place was super. Cannot fault it. Mm-hmm. And but when he was in a different respite system that was going to go for long-term, which he did not know, and that was hard. He was really very agitated there.
That would have been very difficult, because you've got to be the bad guy. You've got to be the person who makes those decisions about keeping him safe. And knowing the what you could or could or couldn't manage with his care as well.
Right. That first place that he was in care was not a fit with him, and I would like to say to people that you can change the care home or something of that, at least here in Queensland, and whatever you can. It took another 6 months for, when we decided that this was not a fit for his abilities and his, what was personality, that we made a move and negotiated that, but it did take 6 months of waiting for the second location, and that was much more of a fit. He was walking outside for, like say 12 hours of every day.
So it had an outdoors area, which I really enjoyed. He'd get outside.
Absolutely.
I remember you telling me that you took calendar pictures with all of these geographical areas around the world that were very stimulating for him, and you really made it sort of an environment that was really tailored to his interests, which I thought was really beautiful.
Right. So, yeah.
And you used to go...
I would do that. That was when he was actually bedridden.
Right.
So, and that would have been the December to May. He was bedridden. So 6 months of being bedridden. So those calendar pictures went up. But prior to that, if I'd put up anything on the wall, it came down.
Oh, okay, yeah.
So any family photos were right up top.
So he had this tendency of going and fidgeting and taking stuff and dissecting stuff and pulling stuff down.
Definitely. There's some good stories. I mean, one day I got there and he sort of motioned behind the curtains in his room, and I was like, God, what is this? Screws and things like that. He'd taken down a light fitting in the on the wall in this room.
Really?
Yes.
Good on him. Good on him. Entertained himself.
That's right. That's because he still had his Swiss Army knife and his house keys with him.
Did he? You didn't know? Oh, that's so funny. Good on him. And didn't he do a lot of pruning?
Oh, yes. That was the second place. Very good. He did a lot of pruning.
Which meant?
Well, taking down the leaves and chewing them, or the buds. And this was a camellia bush. Now, camellia bush, and I thought, what if he's poisoning himself?
How much of the bush was left over?
Oh, the bush bounced back. It's quite all right.
Probably did well for
but
pruning.
yeah, it was. Yes,
kept
active
him entertained.
Yeah. Yes, but camellias are related to the tea plant and vice versa, so it was okay. But initially, I'm going.
You researched that, didn't you?
I had to research that.
Oh, you're amazing. Now, what kind of care? Let's just talk about what should people reach out for. What sort of support should people reach out for when they have a family member with Alzheimer's or dementia? So you talked about researching community groups.
Yes. Yeah. Right. And and what would fit for him? So a day respite was certainly on the cards. Definitely.
We just had a little nod to each other there.
Right. We're having a laugh. Okay. So the day respite and talking with the people there at that place, that was through Alzheimer's Queensland. Mm-hmm. Also, I had stepped up my monthly psychology appointments because I was going through such stress and needed guidance to deal with the fun stuff and not so fun stuff. So I needed to share the funny stories. But
it's important, isn't it? It's important to go and look after yourself and say, this is where I'm at. I need that support. It's very, very important.
Absolutely. So I'd been seeing the psychologist well before before he was into care. So, I had support all along. And the support through Alzheimer's Queensland.
Absolutely.
There's also a program through one of the universities in Tasmania. I was doing that, sort of an online course.
Look at you.
Right.
Well, it's so smart to go and get a network of support.
And it's not for everybody. Some people are, don't do it that way. That's Well,
I've heard of a lot of people who go to groups that are for people with Alzheimer's dementia, but then the actual family members connect with each other because they're bringing people to that group, and therefore they create a network of people going through similar things. So I don't know, there's a singing group for people with Alzheimer's and dementia, and I've heard a few people, and they connect, and it's really lovely because the carers and the family members connect while they're in there singing, which is really important.
And also through the National Gallery in Canberra, some of the art people came to our regional art gallery and taught us how to deal with people, getting a group from a care home, getting residents from a care home in to see the art at our regional art gallery. And I did that sort of little class.
Well, that's good. So let's talk about his actual passing. Had you anticipated it? Was it a shock to you? Did it deteriorate quickly? What was that like for you?
He had moved from, because he was bedridden from December 2021 to when he died in May. He's no longer needed to be in a dementia unit. And was moved to high care.
Yep.
And in the bed. And we also have COVID going around. So if I were there for a meal, I had to move him back to his room because I couldn't be out in a general dining area with him.
Mm.
So that was going on, and I would move him outdoors because we tried to get, either face the bed out to the outside or the chair, and sometimes take him outside. But that was very rare that it managed, certainly because a lot of times because of the weather. So was I expecting this? Well, what was happening, if I were there for a meal, I was finding that he was choking a lot more.
Right. So you've got issues there with just being able to function, basic survival.
Right. And not realizing, and I thought, finally, I cannot go at a mealtime. I'm not really qualified, and I don't know what to do when he's choking like that. And so I stopped going at a lunchtime. Prior to that, I'd been going just about every lunchtime.
Yeah.
And so, but as I was told by staff, well, once he starts choking, the staff no longer continues. And I thought, okay.
That's confronting.
Right. It is confronting.
So basically, if they're choking, then we're not going to be feeding them.
That's right. So, and there was certainly the issue between the pureed food and regular food that you and I would recognize. So, I mean, there was one time when I was feeding him, and he was certainly not able to take it, so I went to ask the staff for a pureed meal, and that was certainly granted, etc. So, yeah, but I was sort of surprised that things had deteriorated. That choking became worse and worse and worse. But it's also, and because clearly the dementia had, he wasn't able to swallow is one of the more things. The fact that he no longer could walk, and the fact that he could no longer swallow.
So that's an end-stage component. Yeah,
absolutely. I mean, I knew that from my father, that when a person is dying, it's actually cruel to give them food.
Why is that?
Because the bodies can't deal with it. You can keep them, their mouth moist and things like that, their lips and things like that moist, but to eat a meal is just cruel. That's what hospice had told me.
Interesting.
At one point.
Yeah, so keep them comfortable as best you can.
That's right. And even with my dad, and I was there nearly until he died, but I had to get back to my mother. Even with him, the staff were coming in to make sure he wasn't getting bed sores. And I told them, I said, please stop. Because I could see on his face was grimaced. He wasn't comfortable. So, again, another thing for end of life.
Yeah.
Just so much interaction, etc.
Just leave them with a bit of peace. And
that's right.
And so what was the time frame for him to pass away?
My
husband? Yeah.
Sort of 3-4 days.
Really? And how did you go when you got the call, or were you there?
I was there.
You were there?
I was there.
That's right. So you stayed there, didn't you?
I stayed there. Yeah. So I was staying in his room. So they brought in a recliner chair, blankets, etc. for me. And, I'd have my meals with them, with him there. Other people would come and go. If they were bathing him or something like that, I would take a walk, that sort of thing. So, and I certainly can't fault the staff.
Amazing. It's amazing what they do.
Yes, exactly. Kind and caring.
It's wonderful.
And the staff from the dementia unit came over to, say their goodbyes, basically.
Sounds like it was a very loving and nurturing end.
It was.
And it sounds like you were very supported.
I was supported.
So wonderful.
So the particular night that he died, I was there. I was about to, sort of snuggle down into the recliner chair.
Yeah.
And I realized that his breathing had changed. And I thought, oh. And he was on morphine. He certainly was on a regular dose of morphine at this point, just to make life for him easier.
Of course.
And so I noticed, as I say, the breathing had changed, and I realized, well, this might be it. I got up and talked with him and had my hand on his shoulder, and he just stopped breathing. As easy as that.
Well, that's a very peaceful end.
It is. It was.
Very peaceful end for quite a depraving process.
Absolutely. And so I stayed there for a little bit, and then I, pressed a buzzer and let people know, and got the nurse and went through and declared things end, and 15, 20 minutes later, I'm in my own house.
Really?
So, yeah. Next day I went in and cleaned up the room.
There you go. So it's been 6 months. Before we wrap up, can you tell us a little bit about what the 6 months has been like for you? Because, I mean, the thing about dementia is Alzheimer's,
Right.
let me focus, is that you know it's coming, and there's a level of preparation in that, but still there's the reality of when you lose that person.
Well, it is sort of startling, I'll say that.
Yes.
But because I've been going home to my own house, and he hadn't been there for 3 years, basically.
Yeah.
So that was not
level
an
of
issue.
normality there.
Right,
Yeah.
so that was normal. But it is sort of, it's confronting. That's all there is to it. It's sort of like, oh.
How have you been? How have you been over these 6 months?
Good. Again, going back to, what I've read and the support from my psychologist, I've maintained all my friendship groups.
So important to have that support network.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So the very next day, I probably wasn't at one of the functions that I normally go to.
Fair enough. Gee, slack.
But I was there the next week.
Were you?
Weeks,
Yeah, and that's
that.
great,
So,
isn't it? Because that just draws you out
That's-
of where your head's at.
That's right.
Bit of routine, normality, support.
And, it's you have to let people know that this is what's happened. So.
Well, I'm glad that you're travelling okay. Any surprises with regard to your grief?
No. I mean, I'm very slowly going through things, and I walk through his study all the time because it's on the way to my bedroom, of course. But
but seriously, your house is going to be kind of a bit of a memory.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
I mean, I should have cleaned
Time
up
machine,
a bit more.
basically.
Yes, it's definitely a time machine. Yeah,
of
right.
his life, and that's still there, and that's something
Definitely.
for you to work through.
Looking through something, I just the other day I found a very tiny little note. Well, it's not a note; it's a birth announcement of him, written by his mother to her parents.
Oh, really?
And it's the stamp is like a 1 cent stamp on
Oh.
it. So in
There you
1945. So there you go.
There you go.
So you find these little treasures, and amongst other things, or whatever. And he's well remembered and loved by lots of people. So yeah,
No question.
no question.
Well, it's taken a lot of strength for you to get through this, a lot of wisdom, a lot of navigation, a lot of you having to be the captain and make the decisions for him, no choice. And you've survived, you've come out the other end. And I think it's a beautiful, beautiful thing that you can share this because, it can be a very isolating path.
Yeah, that's important not to be isolating yourself. It really, really is.
Get support. Get people around you. Get these resources. Listen to these great podcasts. Seriously. Yeah.
Gather your stories. Mine is just one. Anybody's is going to be different from mine.
Yep. Absolutely.
Keep your friendship basis and
keep
go
your
for
support
help.
network. Absolutely. Margie, thank you so much for coming in. I appreciate it immensely.
You're welcome.
It's been really, really special, and I love that we spent time talking about the celebration of his strengths before all of this to kind of see the whole picture. I think that's so incredibly important. Yeah. Well, I don't know about you, but I feel like a bit of a port. I don't know about you. Okay, everyone, thank you so much for coming. This is Signposts for Living with Dr. Kirsten Hunter. And if you want to catch me, we've got the website, kirstenhunterauthor.com, Facebook and Instagram, Kirsten Hunter Author, Twitter, Kirsten Hunter AU. We've got YouTube. She's dancing again, love it. YouTube channel, Psych in Your Car, and here we are. Signposts for Living with Dr. Guest Margie. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
No worries. Thank you.
Thank you.